Hi there. So I'm back with the next episode in my Tantric Goddesses series, and I'm actually really excited for this one because I'm going to be starting to look at the individual goddesses that make up the Mahavidyas. In the previous episodes, I spoke a bit about the overarching principles, the overarching archetypes, and the paradigm behind the tantric goddesses, especially as a group. Excuse me for a bit. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I spoke about in the previous episodes, and in this one, I'm going to be talking. With this episode, I'm going to be talking about each of the goddesses in turn. So first one is always going to be Kali. She is always the first of the Mahavidyas, even when the names of the others, sometimes the order changes around, but even then Kali is always going to be the first Mahavidya, and in a lot of ways you could consider her to be the primordial Mahavidya, the primary central Mahavidya, the theme which basically holds the entire group together. And in some ways you could also interpret the Mahavidyas as being different facets of Kali as one being. So she's always going to be the first in that list. I'm going to try and edit in a picture of Kali somewhere in the frame because I think it'll be easier for you guys to have a visual reference in mind when I talk about her iconography. But to begin with, I'd like to talk a bit about her name. Kali, you could generally, as far as I've seen, there are two interpretations of the name Kali. One deals with her complexion, which is supposed to be dark. It's supposed to be black or midnight blue. So Kali literally means, excuse me, Kali literally means the black one in the Indic languages. That's one interpretation. The other one is about, it relates the name Kali to the Sanskrit word Kal, which stands for time or era, especially in an abstract way. So Kali would be one of the interpretations of that name is that Kali is the devourer of time. She is the cataclysm that at once ends an era and then begins a new one. So there is that. In terms of her iconography, you have, Kali has, like I said, she has dark blue or black skin. She's really dark complexioned. She has disheveled hair, and we're actually going to revisit this particular, disheveled hair is going to be a central theme in some of my discussions. We'll revisit that bit later, but yeah, she has disheveled hair. She has a garland or a necklace of severed heads, and she's wearing a skirt of severed arms, and she's otherwise usually depicted nude. Generally, the most common representations of Kali that I've seen show her with four hands. So one of her hands is held up in the Abhaya Mudra, which is, can you see this? Yes. Which is this one. The Abhaya Mudra stands for the sign of fearlessness, or the sign which grants freedom from fear. The other hand is held up in the Var Mudra, which is this one. Basically, you have palm out facing downwards. So the Var Mudra deals with, it talks about boons being granted. So that's two for hands. The third hand generally holds up a head that she's just severed, and the fourth holds up the scimitar, which is like a curved sword that she used to sever said head. So that gives you a pretty good idea about the sort of energy that Kali represents. She grants boons, she grants fearlessness, or she grants freedom from fear, and she's also associated with violence, severed heads and severed lots of different body parts all around. So she is kind of bloodthirsty in that respect, and that's like a pretty basic description of her iconography. In terms of historical references, Kali, I think, as far as I remember, the earliest references, extant references, of course, we really can't say for sure whether or not these were the oldest references, just, they're the oldest ones that we know of, come from the early medieval period, because we're looking at around 600 to 700 CE. So they come from works such as the Agni Puran or the Garud Puran, where she's described, I think the earliest description that I know of Kali describes her as one of the flickering tongues of Agni, and Agni is the god of fire, or fire personified as a deity. So of course you start from there, where she's obviously a subset of another deity, and then by the time of the late medieval period, Kali of course has a huge cult of her own, and she's become a goddess in her own right, and she's become one of the primary goddesses of the Indian pantheon, of the Indic pantheon, and she's definitely the most important goddess in the Hindu Shaktiyite tradition. So it's she's certainly evolved a lot. So that's Kali from just like an objective description of her. If I were to talk about my personal ways of interpreting her, my personal ways of relating to her as a deity, the easiest way that I would be able to articulate that would be, I think this would be familiar to the tarot readers who are watching this, and hopefully I've got a fair number of those. So Kali, to me, sort of really, she's like an embodiment of the kind of lessons and the kind of energy that the Tower card represents as part of the major arcana in a tarot deck, because on the face of it, she represents violent destruction and dissolution, and of course that's painful and horrific and tragic. So you have all of that energy, of thunder and lightning and violence and a lot of things being lost. But at the same time, if you remember, in the Tower card, at the very edge of it, you have a crab that's crawling out of the body of water, and that is a representation of latent skills or latent gifts which are starting to emerge, catalyzed by the destruction and the tragedy and the dissolution that you're facing. So the Tower card, while it is really not my favorite card, it's sort of like the least favorite card in my deck, in any deck, because I am a person who's really anal about tranquility and order and stability, and the Tower card is sort of like the antithesis of that. But the Tower card, the overarching lesson behind the Tower, talks about transformation. It talks about reincarnation to an extent. It talks about changing. It's like the Death card in that way. It does talk about new beginnings. So Kali, to me, sort of represents that sort of principle, I guess. She is the force which transforms you. She is the force which takes you to a higher level. But of course, in order to do that, you have to go through a destruction of sorts. You have to tear down things which were holding you back from ascending, so to speak. So that's my personal way of relating to her. And I'm probably I'm going to end this here because I think I've gone on long enough. But I would probably make like a part 2 of this video, because there's still lots of things that I haven't discussed about Kali. So we'll see. Thank you so much for watching. Do like and subscribe. Good night.